Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup College Football Podcast. Today, we are going to do the Big Ten preview podcast, which now has will soon have more than 12 teams. But right now, it's still just the 12-team Big Ten, which, of course, makes sense. I'm here, as always, out with my co-host. We actually have a special guest today, but I'll introduce my co-host first, at BuckMetrics on Twitter. How are you doing tonight?
I'm extremely nervous. I hate to do a little behind the scenes stuff here, but it's no secret I had a shaky first year in my my relationship with LeanTossup pod. And over the off season, the executives took me aside and said, "You got to do better than this." So they signed me to an extension, but I have to get at least 35% of my picks right. I got basically the Brian Ferentz extension this year, so hopefully I can hit my 35%.
Hopefully. So that's good. That is a very relevant Big Ten show. We will talk about Iowa later, but I'll first of all introduce our co-host at Walker I141 on Twitter. Welcome, Isaiah. How are you doing today?
Hi, thanks. Great to be on here with you guys. I'm a fan. I listened to the show last year, so real great to be here and get to talk a little Big Ten.
Nice. Thanks for that. So yeah, all right. So we are gonna go ahead and we've been doing, as I was saying now, we've been doing kind of an interview with all of our guests just to kind of get to know you, and we did it ourselves, and it's actually a really kind of fun experiment here. So, who's your team? And I see we are recording on video, so I see a little Purdue P over there. So I'm assuming it's Purdue, right?
Yep. So you got me. I am Purdue. I went to Purdue, graduated in 2018. So they're my team, for better or for worse.
Nice. And then I'll do the next one then. Sorry. And
yeah,
then,
sorry, we're going to alternate here.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll. That one was given away because he has to put the in there. That's fine.
Sorry.
Okay. So what's your favorite program outside of your own?
Yeah. So favorite team other than my own is actually it's Utah. My stepdad is a Utah grad. So growing up, I grew up in Wisconsin, so I was also a Wisconsin fan. But we were a big Utah family. We went to road games. I remember going to actually one of my earliest college football memories, going to Ann Arbor. Watching Utah during their undefeated season help send Rich Rodriguez to his early grave. So Utah's my other team. I still feel like I'm kind of part of their fan base.
Nice.
I remember that. That was 2012, I think.
Yeah.
Was Travis Wilson the quarterback? I don't know if you remember that. The weird guy with the really long hair.
I know the name, and I can't remember if it's that exact year. I want to say it was, but it was. Yeah. It's just so. I mean, I'm barely remembering that trip. Other than the Michigan fans were super cocky because Utah was still in the Mountain West at the time, and then Utah just kind of smacked them.
Yep. Yeah. Well. All right, on the other side of that question, so what's the program for which you have irrational or unsuspected disdain?
Yeah, so I'm going to stay away from one in the Big Ten in the interest of neutrality, but if people follow me on Twitter, they'll know who it is. But the one I would say that I really, especially recently, cannot stand, it's Tennessee. I'm sorry.
Really?
I'm sure Vol Twitter is going to come after me for this. There's something about, so especially in the postseason, Purdue and Tennessee have been playing like everything. Basketball in the Elite Eight, and we had the bowl game, then we had volleyball, and it just keeps coming, and I keep getting exposed to these ridiculous takes on Twitter. And I'm watching Tennessee come off this season from last year where they were really good, they were really fun to watch. You beat Alabama, and they're still tweeting at Purdue accounts about the Music City Bowl.
Oh my goodness.
and how they should have won the Music City Bowl. And all that, and I'm just like, man, if I had the season you just had, I wouldn't be looking backwards at anything. So that's my irrational say. Stop tweeting at us, volunteer fans. We just don't care.
That's a very fair and very weird thing for them to be mad about still, but that's fair. So, all right, what's the best logo in college football, and then the best helmet?
All right, yeah. So best logo, I am a big fan of the wave for Tulane. I think that graphic
is the correct answer.
Thank you. I think that graphic is great. I think that megaphone is great. I think they should put that on everything. The field, the press box, the uniforms, the helmets, put it everywhere.
Absolutely.
And helmet is, it's a Big Ten. There are so many good iconic helmets, and it's probably, you could be right with so many choices. I like Michigan. I think it's a classic helmet. I think it's a perfect mix of simplicity, iconic design. I do like the color scheme. I think it just looks great.
Okay, cool. So who was on your Mount Rushmore of college football?
Yeah, so I feel like I am a little bit like recency bias on questions like this, but I will say for one, as a Purdue fan, I have to put Drew Brees there. I mean,
Oh
you're
my
talking
goodness.
about a guy. I mean, I have to. You're talking about a guy basically who revitalized my program, put
True.
this
Very
program
true.
on the map, was such a big part of Joe Tiller bringing this spread offense into the Big Ten.
Yep.
I love the story, like as a Purdue fan, like a guy who's being told you can't do it, you're too small, you can't do this, and going out and doing it and then becoming the pro quarterback he was. So I have to do that. And then I think of some of the other guys. Again, these are all more pretty recent players, but the next guy I put on there, also as a Purdue fan, but on the other direction, is Jonathan Taylor, the running back from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I watched this guy torch a lot of teams, but I really watched this guy torch my team. And every Wisconsin running back torches my team. It's a common gag now. But this guy was different. Like, you just watch this dude. Every time he has the ball, it was like, what's he going to do now? And I didn't want him to be, I didn't want it to be, what's he going to do now? But that's just how it was. It was just a cheat code kind of player. And I'm really happy that he's kind of found a niche. I hope he can really, in the NFL, I can hope he really can have like some more spotlight, because I think he's got great work ethic and he's a great player. I know later on we were talking about the best college football team ever seen. I'll spoil on it, but on that note, I'm going to go with Joe Burrow, because watching that LSU team, I think you have times where you're like watching a team and you're like, this team is different. This is a special team we're watching. But I remember watching that LSU team and just thinking, this is on a whole nother level.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, you just knew when you were watching them that this team was special. This team's going to do it. Like, you just know. And I think Burrow is just such a big part of that. Like, the kind of player he is, what he did, how he looked. He was just so much fun to watch. You didn't have to be an LSU fan to enjoy watching him play. So I would go with him. And then my last player that I would go with, I struggled with this one. I was going between a couple different guys. I ended up settling on Lamar Jackson, again, because he was a player I watched in person my senior year. We played Louisville. And it's just another one of those players where it's like, I don't know when the next time we're going to see a quarterback who does kind of what Lamar Jackson is doing. The way he could move, the way he could throw. It's just a do-it-all kind of player. And I remember thinking, too, because we did lose that game. It was quite narrow. It was Jeff Brom's first game as Purdue coach, so I thought we were going to get smacked. But I was like, wow, Lamar Jackson only had like a couple hundred yards on this end and a couple hundred yards on this end. We might actually have a defense this year. So those would be the four players that I would pick from some kind of my recent memory.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you love most about college football?
Yeah. So for me, it's like the pageantry and the atmosphere of this game. I was a member of the Purdue marching band, so I felt very connected to this game, and just the environment that this game comes in. I just don't think there's anything like it. I don't think pro football has it. I don't think a lot of other sports have it. I mean, I think college basketball is the closest, and I do love college basketball, but you walk into a college football stadium, especially if you get a chance to go to one of the historic venues. Like my first time when I went to Ohio State, you just feel something going in there and watching this game and how much the fans enjoy it. I think that's what I love about it. There's just nothing else like it.
I didn't know you were in the band. Here's a really nerdy, sneaky bit of trivia. It's about the time of year when I'll start to, when I'm working, like put on YouTube clips of especially Big Ten. Big Ten has the best marching bands by far, and just listen to them in the background when I'm working. And sorry to digress for 20 seconds here, and this kind of touches on where we're going. USC and UCLA bands fit in very well with the Big Ten. I don't know if you agree. They have a very distinct sound. They just have like Big Ten sounds for whatever reasons.
I think the sound absolutely fits in. Now, some purists will say they're not military bands, but I think the sound definitely works. There is a running gag in the Big Ten marching band group about every time you play USC, you have to do a drink every time they play Tribute to Troy. But
yeah, you're done.
yeah, exactly. But I do think the sound works really well, and I think it'll be fun to get a chance to have them eventually. I know for Big Ten bands, we all travel around, so you get chances to hang out with the other bands and meet the other bands. I hope that USC and UCLA get a chance to do that because it'll be great.
USC does.
I have some
don't know
great
about
fans.
UCLA.
I know. I have a really good friend that I met from the Maryland band, so I'm really glad that they get to do that.
Cool.
It'll be a lot of fun, I think.
Okay. Well, I don't know if that's your favorite college football moment. If it's not, then what is?
No, it would actually. It's the 2018 upset win over Ohio State. I was there in the stand. That was a year after I graduated, so I wasn't with the band. I kind of think that I wasn't because I loved my time in the band, but getting to watch that game as a fan in the stands, I would not have gotten to storm the field if I was with the band, so that was fun. But I think the backstory about that game with Tyler Trent and knowing the emotion behind that game, it really was one where you were kind of walking in, and again, you were like, something feels different about this one. And that particular Purdue team, too, it was really – because they started 0-3. They lost to Northwestern in the opener, which was like, okay, that Northwestern team ended up being pretty good. Then they lost to Eastern Michigan on a last-second kick in, like, a rainstorm. They played terribly. So they really – it just kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. But I told my colleagues on Friday before that game started, and I was super confident about it. I was just like, you know what? Purdue's going to beat Ohio State. I'm going to throw my cards down. And Purdue's going to beat Ohio State. And they're all like, a lot of them went to Michigan State. They're all like, oh, you're crazy. You're just saying that, but go have a good time.
Nice.
I went back afterwards. I'm like, well, they didn't just beat Ohio State. They wiped them off the map.
Yeah. I was just looking that up. They were a 12.5 point dog. I kind of felt like they should have been a little longer dogs than that too, right?
I did. I remember looking at that line. And it was one of those lines where it was like, that just doesn't seem right. And the other one I had was in 2001 when we played Michigan State. They were in the top 5 and we upset them. The line of that game was only Michigan State minus 2.5. And I kept telling people, I was like, if they were confident that Michigan State was as good as that ranking says they wouldn't be getting 3 points on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some of that, yeah.
So, obviously you've probably experienced quite a few college game days at your time in the band, but is there another one that you would most want to experience?
Yeah, so I do. I am trying to get to every Big Ten football stadium. I've done a pretty decent job so far, but the big one I really want to get to is Penn State. I want to experience that whiteout.
You got the right answer again.
All right, I'm not embarrassing myself this early. No. That's good. Yeah, I want to get there. It's been on my list for a while. It's just middle of Pennsylvania, it's so hard to get to, but it's on my list. I've got coworkers in Pennsylvania as well who are like, you need to get here. So I'm working on that.
Nice. All right, you hit on the next question, so we'll skip to the next one. So more personally, what movie have you seen the most times?
Yeah, so this is funny. A lot of my friends will tell you they get really annoyed about this. I'm not really a movie person. Like, I'll watch them if they're on TV. If there's something I really need to see, I will go out and see it. But if I combine like my entire life, and maybe this is a little not topical too, I actually would say Titanic.
There you go.
I grew up a huge Titanic fan. Huge Titanic fan. I built models. I had all the books. I had the paintings, everything like that. And so I love the movie, but as a kid growing up, I wanted nothing to do with the love story. So I had the two tape VHS set, and that first one basically never got touched until I was older. I would always just skip to the second one because this is what I want to see. I want to go and dig into like how historically accurate this thing is, which it actually is pretty historically accurate. Not that I'm surprised with James Cameron, but that would be probably the movie I've seen the most.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a really cool Lego Titanic model. I'm looking to build it. Do you have that?
I want it so badly, but I have a cat, and I'm pretty sure that trying to build that thing with a cat it would be. I wish I could have it though. I want it badly.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then what's your non-political message to make the world a better place?
Yeah. So I think the way I look at it is like I kind of compare it to college football, right? Like we have different fandoms, we have different rivalries. Some of us don't like each other, that's pretty normal. But at the end of the day, we all get together and we watch this crazy game and we cheer for this crazy game. We cheer for the storylines and we like the bands, we like the players, all this kind of thing. And I feel like if we all kind of looked at each other more like that, where it's, instead of focusing on you like Indiana, how dare you? We look at it as, oh, you like college football. I like college football, right? I try not to pick too many battles. There are a few that I will go after, but I think that if we kind of focused more on the overarching picture here, we'd probably get on the right track.
I agree, and let's start with the Vol fans since they seem to be so reasonable, right? All right, cool. Well, thank you for that. Just a quick overview of the Big Ten, a few little things that are changing. As Robert mentioned, Big Ten is going to gain USC and UCLA next season, which sadly, and I mean this seriously, if you listened last year, this is the last season of the Big Ten West, my favorite division, although we'll hit on it. I think we're starting to see some cracks in the identity with Luke Fickell coming in and Matt Rule coming in. And Northwestern's going to go from being gritty and tough to just horrible. So the end is in sight, sadly. And also, going along with the USC and UCLA coming on, Pac-10 Big Ten signed a new media rights deal, which has pretty much just been a tectonic shift and kind of disrupted the entire apple cart of college football. So, what we're going to do here is I'm going to go over my most fascinating team. I'll do my diatribe here, then I'll get the opinions of the other two, and then we'll just take turns introducing teams after that. So, my most fascinating team in the Big Ten is Michigan State. And, okay, let's just do a little background here. Fourth season under Mel Tucker. The offense I had rated as a plus 1.2 last year. The quarterback play was horrible. Peyton Thorne. His apex was an 80. Real quick side note, just my three metrics I refer to. Apex is a quarterback rating where 100 is an average quarterback. GGAB, ground game against Boston College, or above Boston College, is basically the production of a running game compared to if Boston College had that many carries. And then Ryan, RYAN, is receiving yards above noob, which means how many yards did this guy get based on the number of catches, where if we just had a replacement level guy with the same number of catches, and then measures your, I'd just say maybe cumulative explosivity of a receiver. Anyways, back to Michigan State. Quarterback play, horrible, apex of 80. Under Mel Tucker, the Michigan State quarterbacks have apex ratings of 58, 118, and 80. Not a great trend. Going back one season further, at Colorado, his quarterback had an apex of 83. Now, Peyton Thorne left. Noah Kim steps in. He had very good numbers, but his play was really, really limited, 19 attempts. Some cynics could say that might be because he hasn't spent long enough in the Mel Tucker system to really be poisoned and have his number dragged down. We'll see. They lost a lot of their Ryan from last year, 72% of it. Keon Coleman, who was 34% of their entire team, Ryan, transferred to Florida State. So even if Kim is better than Thorne, I'm wondering, will it make a difference? Since there's nobody to really throw the ball to, that scares defenses, as far as I know. Their running game was horrible. Their GGAB was 97th in all of FBS, and making matters even worse, their offensive line projects to have little improvement for next year. Their defense was a negative 3.5 last season by my ratings. Run defense was a little bit below average nationally in the Big Ten. The pass defense was horrible. They gave up an average apex of 136 last season. They are last in the Big Ten. Giving up a 136 is like basically you made every quarterback that you faced turn into Drake May or Sam Hartman. That's pretty elite company, but in a bad way. Let me see what else here. The the 22 defense is actually worse than the 21 defense, even though based on my improvement and returning talent metrics, they should have been significantly improved, which is just, it's a dire picture here. And then we're looking at on the defense again, below average metrics in terms of experience and projected improvement. So it's pretty grim on both sides of the ball. I want to go to the Mel Tucker resume. So 2019, 5th in the Pac-12 South. Goes to the Big Ten. Here's how he's finished in the Big Ten East. 7th, 3rd, and 5th. He kind of looks to me like a defensive coordinator running the offense with a defensive coordinator mentality, while at the same time somehow doing a horrible job with the defense. That's a kind of neat trick, but not something you really want to see. Their season total is at 5. You get even money on the under. I actually think that they're bad enough to actually hit that under. I have a hard time seeing them winning 6. So why do I have them as a fascinating team and not just a horrible team? Tucker's contract is $9.5 million annually. It goes through 2032, and it's fully guaranteed. So after this season, we are looking at a buyout that would be, it just kicked in. So the buyout is going to be like $84 million if he's fired after this season, which can't happen. And what makes this an even better story is, I don't know if either of you know this contract is fully funded by the now owner of the Suns, Matt Ishbia, if I said his name right. So this has like implications for like NBA fans. Like if a Michigan State goes like 1-11, people are going to be saying like, what Suns fans are going to be thinking, what does this mean for my team? Is this guy like, does he know what he's doing? He fired a pretty, successful and popular coach with the Suns. I'm wondering with him just doing this deal on himself, Ishbia, if we can just call him Aggie Matt as a little homage to Robert's favorite program, the Aggies and all their stupid boosters that ruin things. So I think that this could be a fascinating narrative that unfolds if they win 8 games or 7 or 6, it's no fun. But if they're looking at a 4-win season, it could be just nonstop material all season long. That's the end of today's sermon on Michigan State. Isaiah, your thoughts on Michigan State?
It's very interesting. I'm going to go right ahead and say it. I'm on that under. I think they're going to be bad. I think it's going to be bad. It's hard to watch. The funny thing too is I have a lot of Michigan State friends, and they're very proud of being Michigan State fans. They look for positives in just about everything. I don't hear any good talk about this Michigan State football team. I just it's really gloomy, and I think you look about it too. They have that season with Tucker, right, with Kenneth Walker, and he's running all over people. And they have this top 10, top 5 season. They get to the New Year's Six Bowl. They win the New Year's Six Bowl, and they're pressured. This guy, he's a hot commodity. He came in here. He's already gotten the funk of the D'Antonio, the end, how that ended away. We got to get this guy. So they give him this ridiculous contract. And I said it at the time. I was like, this guy could be a good coach. You don't know. I'm not giving him that contract because he didn't do anything at Colorado.
Yeah.
That I think. I mean, he didn't show anything at Colorado for me.
No.
So you are banking on this guy being able to sustain this, a season which, again, their defense was atrocious. Kenneth Walker saved them. And you talk about that defense and how they made everybody good. During that Purdue game, every third down, it was an automatic completion for Purdue. Wide open. These were not hard crossing routes or anything. It was straight up the middle. There's a guy. I don't know how many defenses also could actually get fooled by just doing a simple reverse and having the entire line just move down the field. But they found a way. And then last year I said, okay, the defense is bad. This is a defensive coach. If he is worth anything on this defensive end, the defense is going to get better. and it didn't. It got worse. And it didn't look good. It's not even like it looked a little bit better. It looked just as bad. They didn't fire Scotty Hazelton at defensive coordinator. I really thought they would, but they didn't. So you basically have the same staff, and this resume with Mel Tucker is hit the lottery on this historic transfer running back that did everything. Not to take away, they did have a couple really, really good wide receivers, but he basically did everything. Well, they don't have that. Jalen Burkers, he's a good running back. They've got a pretty good line as far as that is concerned. But at some point, I just don't see this defense getting better. And if the defense is going to be this bad, you need an elite offense, and they don't have that. And you start to get concerned, at least for me at this point, about what are the thoughts inside this program? What's the culture? The fans certainly are losing it. So you're not going to have fans, showing up to Spartan Stadium. That's pretty gloomy because this is a program that's pretty proud. And so to not have fans in the stands is pretty depressing. And then you look at the schedule, and the schedule is brutal. I mean, you got Washington in the non-conference season with a bad defense, so good luck with that. Mike Penix is going to throw for 600 yards on you. And then you've got, you've got Ohio State, you've got Penn State, you've got, Michigan, which obviously they've beaten good Michigan teams before, but I don't see that happening this year. So I'm fully in. It was 5.5 when I got that win total, so I was like, this team is not a bowl team. So I was pretty happy with that under.
Yeah, one thing I will say about Michigan State is, again, I think it really just shows that I think you can have you can basically, there's so much that can be powered by just a good running back, right? I mean, Kenneth Walker really carried this team, and there's a lot of teams through the past that have been kind of carried in that exact same way. And the second he's gone, the team basically collapsed last year. And I think, and we even saw that last year a little bit with, and we're going to keep bringing the same example back, in Bijan Robinson with Texas, right? The second they get to that bowl and he's not in that game anymore, they got crushed by Washington, right? So this is the thing, and that's going to be, again, there's a couple teams that are going to replace running backs. Tulane is one, obviously. Obviously, Michigan State hasn't found their running replacement. Texas has to replace two running backs, not even just their first running back. They have to replace two of their running backs. So I think there is legitimate concern here that I don't know if I like. Again, they seem to be basically. It just seems like their entire offense relied around running the ball, and now they can't run the ball anymore. So like, all right, well, we're done now. Like Peyton Thorne was not particularly good. He's not even a starting quarterback wherever he transferred to. That's how not good he was. And like now you're going to replace him, and then you're going to hopefully try to replace Kenneth Walker, and then also fix a defense that has gotten worse in 2 years. And you're going to be playing against teams like Michigan, Ohio State. Like it's not a good recipe for success. I'll say that.
Yeah. Just to turn the NBA thing kind of around a little bit, I just thought of this as you all were talking. NBA franchises are not inexpensive. They cost a good amount of money. That might actually just make a buyout kind of impossible, where maybe Ishbia can't come up with $84 million. Even if they go 0-12, that's not going to happen. But say that things completely implode, that probably just, we could go into a bad spot for like years and years here, maybe until maybe that buyout goes down to 50 million, just because he sank a lot of cash into buying an NBA team. Speaking of teams in a bad spot, I think you're a little more bullish on this one than I am, Isaiah. The Iowa Hawkeyes. Give us your breakdown on them.
Yeah, Iowa is my most interesting team for the season, and it's a little bit of a combination of expectations. It's also a little bit of a combination of storyline. We already got one Brian Friends joke in. I'm sure we can find ways to get more. It's very interesting with Iowa because you talk about playing in the Big Ten West. This is a team that is like tailor-made for the Big Ten West. They don't look pretty. They don't look flashy. They don't always even look good. But they've got one of the best defenses in the country. They have the best defensive coordinator in the country in Phil Parker. And so they're kind of built for this really ugly style of play. But I didn't realize how ugly last year it was going to get. I mean, when you watch them beat an FCS team, a good FCS team. South Dakota State is a good FCS team. But at home, they beat them without scoring a touchdown.
Yeah, that's right.
Two safeties and a field goal.
2 safeties and a field goal. It's the best 7 points you're ever going to see. And it's just, Brian Friends was such a huge part of that. I mean, this guy is just, it's a nepotism hire. He shouldn't be there. He shouldn't be doing that job. But he's not going to get fired because Kirk Friends isn't going to get fired. Even with a new athletic director, Kirk Friends isn't going to get fired.
Yeah.
But the other thing that they didn't have going for them was Spencer Petras at quarterback. I feel bad for the guy. I really do. I don't like to pick on college kids, but he just had no business being a starter in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Not at all.
I mean, it was just terrible. It was hard to watch. Now you got Cade McNamara coming in from Michigan. This is a guy who has started a season. He's experienced with a very good team. He's played some really good teams in the Big Ten East. So you immediately have an improvement at that quarterback slot. I like Caleb Johnson as their running back. Again, in the Big Ten West, you need to have a run game. And Caleb Johnson also had a pretty good season despite their offensive line not being very good. So I think he's got a lot of potential. You've got some really interesting pieces to throw to for an Iowa scheme. So you've got 2 pretty good tight ends. You've got the Michigan transfer Eric All coming in. You've got Luke Lackey, who's returning, and I think that the tight end scheme really works with this kind of style of play. There's all kinds of jokes going around for the USC people coming in about USC coming into Iowa and seeing 3 tight ends stacked in the box for the first time. But that's kind of this Iowa style. And then again, you've got a Phil Parker defense. You know what you're going to get on that defensive line. They've lost some strong pieces. They've lost some NFL talent. But I can't ever think of a time when I'm looking at Iowa and I'm like, this defense is questionable. They're going to find a way.
Yeah.
Phil Parker's going to get what he needs to get. That defensive line is still very good. So they'll be able to control the trenches kind of and control the tempo. For me, I just need to see a little bit of offensive improvement from this team. That shouldn't be hard. That defense or that offense was awful. And I like the pieces that they're bringing in. It's a manageable schedule. The at Penn State game is the one where I look at them like there's just no way they're probably not going to win that game. But I don't think anybody else on this schedule scares me. You get Rutgers as a crossover game. That helps a lot. Again, you get Michigan State at home. I think that helps a lot. So it kind of feels like the season for Iowa comes down to 2 to 3 games. It's the Wisconsin game is the big one. And then you've got Illinois and you've got that last one against Nebraska. And the win total on Iowa, I don't know why, but it was set at 7.5. I can't tell you the last time Iowa won under 7 games.
That's true.
Maybe they won 7 my freshman year. I'm trying to remember. But this is a team that wins 8 games every year. So I am on that over. I don't see any way that even last year they weren't that good and they beat that win total. So I don't see any way they go under that. And I think this is absolutely a contender for the West with how they play and expecting some offensive improvement. And, Brian Friends will test that, I'm sure, now that he's sitting on his participation trophy contract. But I really think that Iowa has some potential and they're going to be worth watching.
You want to go, Robert?
Yeah, I think my most interesting team for this year is going to be Wisconsin.
On Iowa. Sorry.
Oh, on Iowa. Okay.
Comments on Iowa. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, pretty much we've said a lot of that, and we're going to talk about Iowa later. We're going to talk about Iowa many times throughout the year. But yeah, basically, the one thing I will say, maybe why the season win total is 7.5, is although yes, it is a huge upgrade at quarterback. I think that even in a system that's not great, it's questionable exactly how much that will have an impact. And eventually, at some point, I think they were saying, okay, well, yeah, Iowa's defense was good, but they lost a couple pieces from that defense. Are they going to be able to restock them fully in 1 year? I think the betting market's saying maybe not. And this is the thing, right? If the defense regresses, like if the offense gets a little better, okay, maybe you can put up some points. But if the defense gets worse, then suddenly they're scoring. It's not like the defense gets gradually worse, then suddenly you're not winning that game 7-3, suddenly the team could put up maybe a couple touchdowns there, and then you have to get a lot better on offense, right? And the thing is, the whole offensive strategy for Iowa, I mean, now maybe it was because of Spencer of Petras, because of that, but usually it was like run on first down, run on second down. Okay, now we've got 2nd and 8. Now we've got to throw the ball. And like, is that going to change? Because like, I mean, maybe the reason for that was because they were like, we've got Spencer Petras, we can't throw the ball, and behind him we've got Alex Padilla, who transferred, I think, to a G5 school and is their 3rd string starter, which is rough. That is a very, very rough outcome. But this is the thing. It's like, was that why that was the offensive plan? I kind of just think that was their offensive plan in general. I kind of think this is just old school smash mouth football, and it's not really accepting that we've changed and modern times have changed now. And I think that unless they do that, I think we're going to be stuck. I think you could maybe even potentially see a regression. Like I have Iowa as basically lobby or in some cases stairs down. Yeah, okay, you're upgrading the quarterback, that's fine, but your defense could be worse. And yeah, people are going to eventually figure out how to beat this defense, right? And the thing is, I think they will. And I said this in one of our preview podcasts too. I think they are going to try to score more points this year. I actually think there is a risk, and you may actually have to bet some alt spreads for Iowa when they're playing a lesser opponent, because they're going to try to. No, and you're laughing, but you know it's
very
true.
Yeah,
because they're going to rack up points against bad teams to try to save Brian Ferentz's job, and it's insane. But that's where we're at. They're going to risk injury on their players to try to save the Suns' job, and that's nuts. But that's where we are. And I think they're going to beat up lots of bad teams, but I think they're probably going to have a worse time against better teams, right? Like, you could score more points, that's great, but if you then are suddenly allowing them to score more points, there's not much savings there.
Yeah, number one, you had the elements of a great Korean drama right there, where like some promising young kid gets injured because he's playing in the 4th quarter to save Brian Ferentz's job. Number two, I totally get the case for improving with an actual quarterback that literally took a team to its first college football playoff bid. I need to see it work under this guy. So I got to see it. The third thing is, I actually was puzzled by this. So I asked both Google Bard and ChatGPT why Brian Ferentz is still the offensive coordinator. Google Bard wins. It had the best answers. Here's our Google Bard's answers. Brian is the only one who could read his dad's handwriting. Kirk is the only one who understands Brian's PowerPoint presentations. Iowa posted an opening for offensive coordinator, and only Brian applied. I think that might be the winner. ChatGPT did not do as good. He said because Kirk wants to prove even a broken clock is right twice a day. Google Bard wins this one. You said Wisconsin is your most fascinating team, Robert, right?
Yeah, I'll pick Wisconsin. Again, I think when you're basically replacing a coach, you're getting rid of Grant Mertz, you're bringing in a better quarterback in Tanner Mordecai. You're also bringing in Luke Fickell, who brought Cincinnati to the college football playoff. And again, the Wisconsin team overall, outside of Graham Mertz, is actually pretty half decent, right? You got Braylon Allen, one of the best running backs in college football now. Like, there's the pieces there for a really good team there. Now, and Tanner Mordecai put up a lot of points last year in SMU. If you can replicate that, then yeah, I think this team could actually do some stuff. And now it's going to be fascinating. I mean, both ways, right? I think fascinating because in some ways can cut both ways, fascinating good or fascinating bad. And I think there is the potential here for this team to be really, really good, but then maybe this doesn't work out. Maybe they're just kind of middling or something. But I lean more towards this is going to be a really fun team to watch that might be able to really put together a power running game fixed with like a pretty lethal air attack. So.
Okay. Yeah, I have them as stairs up. I completely get the case for them to just take a step and a half or 2 steps forward on offense. They actually are one of these teams that actually retained more than 100% of their Ryan from last year. They have 120% of the Ryan because of who they brought in through the portal, and that's the Phil Longo new offensive coordinator factor. So I think they'll be fine on offense. I'm really concerned about defense. When we did the ACC preview, I kind of tipped off to this. I said, listen to the Wisconsin or the Big Ten preview to kind of listen to what Phil Longo does. Going to go a little closer here because there's some very specific data here. No defense for a team that has had Phil Longo as an OC has ever had a positive defensive rating in the BuckMetrics going back to 2014, ever. They've all been below FCS average, or FBS average, which is pretty bad considering he's been at Power 5 jobs. Some little kind of sequencing here. So Ole Miss is a negative 0.2 before he arrives. He arrives their offensive coordinator. Their defensive rating goes to a minus 5.7, a minus 5.0. He departs, and the offense goes back to a negative 0.6. He goes to North Carolina. His first 3 seasons, the defense is basically the same, negative 0.8, negative 0.9, negative 0.8. Then it drops off the grid to a negative 6.4. What's interesting about this is the first 3 of those seasons where they still kind of held on. The defensive coordinator was Jay Bateman, who was awesome at Army, and I think he kind of just held it together. And once he left, he's actually the linebacker coach at Florida. I don't know if that name's familiar to you, Robert. And they brought in Gene Chizik. They just went off a cliff. So I think highly of Fickle as a defensive mind, and I like Mike Tressel. I just, I'm dying to see what this defense is. I'm not going to bet them under. Their total is 8.5, which seems a little bit high, but there's so many unknowns here. In the gambling lessons, I basically learned I'm not going to bet an under for a new coach coming into a decent program like this. So I'm very interested to see what happens with the defense, but it's wait and see for me. Isaiah?
I'm with you on the win total for Wisconsin. I can't get a read on it. I didn't touch it because I think, and maybe this is kind of the story of the Big Ten West, just about nothing would surprise me with a lot of these teams, and Wisconsin is one of them. I really do like the Luke Fickell hire. I think when you think about what Wisconsin is and you think about what Wisconsin football is, I think it makes sense that this is a guy who can kind of build back up this, defensive powerhouse, this running game, ground pound, control the tempo of the game kind of team. So, I like the direction that they're going in there. Again, as a Purdue fan, I see Wisconsin and I think, what running back is going to get 600 yards on us this year? Last year was Braylon Allen. This year it's going to be Braylon Allen again. It doesn't matter, but Braylon Allen is an incredible player. This is a guy who can win them games just by himself. He is that good. By the way, they have a really good backup too. I think you take Ches Maluzzi and you put him in just about any other program in the Big Ten other than maybe like Ohio State or Michigan, and he could start. So you got the offensive, identity here for Fickell to work with. I agree with you also that the defense is the concern. They've lost a decent amount. The Lions in general were not up to what I would expect from a Wisconsin team. And the D-line is already losing some really good starters like Herbig. So you're taking a line that didn't get much pass rush at all and taking away some of their best players, taking away some of their key playmakers in the secondary. Normally, if you told me that a Wisconsin team was going to have a really good offense or at least a better offense, I'm careful on saying really good offense with Wisconsin, but at least a better offense. And you told me that the questions for Wisconsin were going to be on the defensive end, I would peg them to be pretty good because in general, I trust what Wisconsin's going to do. The wrinkle in this is a first year of a new coach. And even a proven coach sometimes needs time, even with a proven program, to build something up. So I think Wisconsin's a very intriguing team in terms of if they went 10 wins and won the West, I wouldn't be surprised at all. If they went 6 or 7, they're going to make a bowl. But if they went 6 or 7 wins and they kind of struggled and that defense really does kind of hurt them and the running game can't just sustain itself, that wouldn't surprise me either. So, for me, as far as a betting play, I'm staying away from them, and I don't think really anything will surprise me other than if Purdue beat them for the first time in 17 years. That would surprise me.
Yeah, I was going to say it would be right were it not for the change at Purdue, but we'll get to that a little later. All right, I'll go next. Penn State. I have them as an elevator up. They're the reigning Rose Bowl champions. They had a pretty good offense last year. Obviously, the big story here is that the amazingly, occasionally adequate Sean Clifford is gone, and Drew Aller comes in. They retain 87% of their Ryan from last year, which is really good. Their offensive line has the highest both returning experience and improvement metrics of all the offensive lines in the Big Ten, and they had a good running game too last season. As I look at this, I really wish that like Aller had thrown maybe like 100 passes last season rather than 60. Not sure what Franklin was thinking there. Maybe just he didn't want to upset the apple cart. I don't know. Maybe there's a whole Sean Clifford anon thing we can go down. I'm not going to do. Their defense was awesome. Their pass defense was third in FBS, and the run defense was fifth in FBS by my GGAB metric. And here's the scary part. They should be the eighth most improved defense in all of FBS. They could be scary good. It seems to me like the whole post-COVID build has been towards this season, and maybe that's why, I don't know, Clifford got a long leash because they were just really looking to this year as this year and something separate from the old one. And the schedule's really, really kind to them as well. The total's 9.5. I don't think I'm going to bet that. I just, when you face Ohio State and Michigan, I want to leave some kind of margin. But I'm not going to say I can't see doing that. Taking the over there. The thing that's interesting is, both I would call us three the cognoscenti, if you will, of college football. And we're on I'm not going to spoil, but I think, the smart people know Penn State's going to be really good this year. And the kind of casuals are like, boy, they're plugging in a couple of pieces here. It's really weird. So I don't see them offering a lot of value at any point this season unless they're getting a lot from one of the big two in the East.
Or laying a little.
Oh, good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And this is one thing that I want to mention about that too, because one of my favorite results last year was Penn State versus Auburn. That game, because I remember that line was Penn State -3, and I was like, I'm looking at my model, and my model's got Penn State as like a 20-point favorite. That's like wrong. And I'm like, I'll bet the -3.
I was all over that one.
And that's a regret. I should have taken out a mortgage, put that on. No, but this is the thing. Like, I should have put more. And the thing is, I think one of the strategies I'm going to learn more this year is that when I get to a point in the model when the model says something like that, and I'm like, you know what, that seems right, and that there's a really bad line there, not only are you going to put more on that spread, but you're also going to start tinkering with some alt spreads. -7.5, -9.5, -13.5. Start playing with some of those more. I think that's a very valuable lesson to have this year.
Yeah. Just one last thing on Penn State. I seriously think that Aller coming in makes the Big Ten East the best division in all of football. I can't, I don't want to make this an hour on that, but just something to think about in your spare time. I don't see a division that's better than the Big Ten East now. So that's my take. Isaiah?
Yeah, I really do. I like Penn State as well. The thing about Penn State, I feel like they get a little bit of, I don't know if it's criticism or what it is, or if people are just overlooking them, because when you look at the East, it's everyone's already looking ahead to Ohio State, Michigan, and that's all anybody wants to do, because it usually does end up coming down to Ohio State, Michigan. This is a team that you would be foolish not to be looking at, because again, you've got this quarterback, and yeah, he is new and he doesn't have a lot of experience. This is a guy who's really talented and can be really good. And you did touch on it a little bit. There's another thing with Penn State where you're saying, I don't know what James Franklin was thinking. I say that a lot when I'm watching Penn State. I don't know what James Franklin is thinking, especially when it comes to clock management. So, one thing you do look at for Penn State, as we've kind of built to this season where they could really do something special, is this feels like a prove-it moment. You've got this defense that could be one of the best, forget the Big Ten, best defenses in the country. I mean, they're stacked at every single position, from the line to the secondary to the corners. Everything here, sets that defense up to just be, no fly zone, no run zone. You've got a really good running duo that, again, is important when you're playing in the Big Ten. Maybe a little bit less in the Big Ten East, but it's still really important. And you've got a really good offensive line. So all of these pieces are here. Other than maybe you probably want a little bit more depth in the wide receiver core. But this is like a prove-it moment for James Franklin, because the way I look on this team is, and I didn't bet it because you do want the margin, but I think that for me, if I'm looking at this team, for them to have a successful season, you got to get those 10 wins. And I mean, I don't actually have their schedule up, but I feel like when I was looking at it, the only real game where I was like, ooh, that could be a little bit iffy is that at Illinois game. But it felt like the rest of it was like, boy, they could breeze through this. And I do think they're going to beat Illinois. But so you get those 10 wins, and then you just got to give yourself, nobody's going to call your season a failure if you lose to Michigan or Ohio State, but play respectable, don't get blown out. They got blown out in the second half by Michigan. They played a respectable first half in the Big House, then they got blown out. And I don't think I don't quite remember the Ohio State game, but I don't think it was particularly close, unless you have it up.
For a while it was, and then
it's the same. So it's kind of the same thing where it was like you had like a, there's some pieces, you have some flashes. So now, put those pieces together, show us something. But either way, I'm pegging this team for 10 wins, and if you don't get 10 wins with this roster, I think something has gone wrong.
Yeah.
If I have one more thing on Penn State there, the thing is, although yes, there probably is value, and I actually do have Penn State as a stairs up. Again, amazing defense, hopefully a better QB this year. The problem is, at a certain point, the stairs only get you so far, right? Because and this is the thing, right? Because like 10-2, okay, who are the two losses to? Michigan, Ohio State, right? And like they're the top of the conference, right? And okay, yeah, you could get a little bit better, but there's only so much you can get better until you take them down, right? Until you are the best in the conference, right? So like, are we saying that Penn State should win the conference? I don't know. Maybe they could potentially, but like, there's not much. Like, I feel like there's a gap there, and then once they breach that gap, then they're just winning the conference, right? And like, I think it's been clear for a couple of years now that they're up there, but they're just a little bit below. And while they may close that gap, I'm not 100% sure that they will close that gap this year. I say this as someone who actually bet Penn State to cover the spread against Ohio State last year, which I won. Now, that was kind of garbage time touchdown for Penn State to cover that. But Ohio State did. Now, there was other BS the other way, too, because like some guy got like a pick six and a football return. It was some insane play. There was some insane stuff going either way in that game. But no, like I think when you look at this, it's stairs up, but like the stairs only get you so far until you have to take the elevator. Like, if that makes sense, like you can only get up. There's a ceiling there, and I don't know if that ceiling is the top of the conference or just below it. And while they might get very close to that ceiling this year, I don't know how high that ceiling is.
Yeah, it's kind of the problem when you're playing in this division where the top two in Michigan and Ohio State are they are both playoff contending teams basically every single year. And so it's so tough to judge a team like Penn State, because for me, it's like, yeah, you want them to beat one of those teams and take that next step. But it's also pretty unfair to say you didn't go into Ann Arbor and beat Michigan. Your season's a failure. I mean, like we wouldn't tell Tennessee that you didn't go into Athens and beat Georgia, so your season's a failure. So
guess what? Nobody did that.
Yeah.
So, one last thing before we move on. You mentioned the game at Illinois. That just brings up one of my favorite trapdoors that I think it's really overlooked is the first conference road game. Is always like just a sneaky disaster waiting to happen. Pete Carroll was under 500 at USC in that situation, and I think he lost like maybe 3 conference games in the rest of his career. That first conference road game is just so tricky, and it gets overlooked again and again. Anyways, so Penn State to Ohio State. Robert, you got this one.
Yeah, so Ohio State, again, last year, one of the best teams in college football, a horrendous field goal at midnight away from being potentially the college football champions, the defending champions. They lose a lot. They lose one of their first round wide receivers, of which they had three, so that's fair. So they lose one of the three of them, and they lose their quarterback, CJ Stroud. He's gone to the Houston Texans now. They lose a couple other pieces too, but they keep a lot of their offense is still intact. But again, quarterback is the most important piece there. I have them as a stairs down team. The thing is, it's hard to keep that pace, right? Like again, we just don't know. Now again, it seems as though Ohio State just keeps churning out 5-star quarterbacks and basically NFL draft ready quarterbacks from. So we'll have to see. But again, at some point, I'm not betting on that happening again. Like here's the thing: we could be here and we will be watching this relatively early. I think Ohio State plays someone a couple weeks in. I can't remember the exact. I think it's what? Do they play Notre Dame a couple weeks?
They play
in,
Notre Dame. They play at Notre Dame, actually.
Which week is it? Like week 2 or?
No, it's a couple weeks in.
Yeah.
Because they started Indiana.
Oh yeah. So okay, that's a good get ready game.
Yeah.
But that's a good warm up game. But no, this is the thing, right? Like he could come out and he could be amazing, right? He could go play throw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns against Notre Dame, right? We don't know yet, right? Now, the thing is that could happen, and I'm not saying it won't happen, but I'm not betting on that happening in advance, right? I'm not betting on Ohio State future because I think, it's in a weird way, but I think there's like a 50-50 chance of that happening. Like he could throw for 350 and 3 touchdowns. He could also throw for 250 and 1, right? We just don't know that what the difference for that is yet. And of course, he's helped by having probably 2 future first-round wide receivers in Igigba. I can't. That name is really hard to say.
Egbuka.
Ibuka,
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
And then Marvin Harrison Jr. So he has probably 2 NFL first-round wide receivers, and that will help him a little bit to an extent. But at a certain point, is he as talented as CJ Stroud? I don't know. And the other question is, CJ Stroud had some issues too. He was really bad under pressure. Now, the only teams that could really exploit that last year were Michigan, Iowa to a much lesser extent, and Penn State. But this is the question, right? Now, maybe this guy can be better under pressure than CJ Stroud was. That can help them a lot. But I think there's a lot of question marks. I'm penciling in a slight regression. I think they'll probably lose at least 1 game, maybe 2 games. Maybe this is where Penn State can kind of overtake them finally. But
yeah, I've got them stairs up, although barely. It's a flat stairwell. Just a little more color on the returning talent. The top 10 players in Ryan last year, 6 went to the NFL, 1 transferred from Georgia State to Louisville, 1 is at Washington, Romo Dunze, and then the other 2 in the top 10, number 1 and number 6, play for Ohio State. That's nuts. You've got basically 2 of the top 4 returning receivers on this team. The new quarterback, we'll see. It's not like he's a 3-star that they had to throw in there. I can't imagine they'll have problems at quarterback. I think the defense improves under year 2 under Jim Knowles. He at Oklahoma State, he showed pretty steady improvement year 1 to year 2. I think that this roster is farther along than what he ran into at Oklahoma State. So, I'm kind of looking at what he did from year 2 to 3 at Oklahoma State, and he improved him by 4 points, which I think is pretty reasonable. They need to tighten down the pass defense. That was their problem last year. So I think it's a little different version, but not too much of last year. It also seemed like to me in the playoff game that after losing to Michigan State, that was like the most intense I've seen Ryan Day on the sideline by far. I don't know if I was just imagining that, but he looked like way too into it. Like, get your meds on, coach. I was worried about him. He was just way too intense. So, what do you think about Ohio State, Isaiah?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that the narrative of last year's Ohio State team. I have a lot of Ohio State friends. I go to Columbus on a fair amount to visit them, and it's like you lose 1 game and it's fire the coach and it's burn everything down. These fans are crazy, man. But you look at last year's team and you think they are 1 historically shanked field goal away from possibly being national champions. And I think that's crazy. But I think if you're like just barely stairs up, I'm looking at them as just barely stairs down. This is a loaded roster like it always is. You've got a really good running back duo with Williams and Travion Henderson. You've got an absolutely loaded wide receiver core. I think Marvin Harrison could be the best wide receiver in the country. You've got Ibuka. You've got Julian Fleming also back. So there's plenty of targets. You know, it's hard to always ask, this a new quarterback to come in at a place like this and be the CJ Stroud, but it was also hard to ask CJ Stroud to come in and be the next Justin Fields, and he didn't. How do we go? With that? I think Ohio State at this point has kind of proven that they can do it, and when you have such a stacked offense, you don't need this guy to be, Aaron Rodgers out there or whatever. He doesn't have to be making these like wow plays. He just needs to be serviceable, and he has the talent to do that. On the defensive side, they have shown improvement. I think you'd look at them 2 years ago before Knowles came in, and that defense was just atrocious. So they're getting better. They do need to cut down on the big plays. We'll see if they can do that. I think my biggest concern that I look at Ohio State with is it's almost a style thing, because I was looking at their schedule and I'm looking at the teams that they play, and the three red flags that I saw obviously were the Michigan game again, the Penn State game, and that Notre Dame game. And the reason that I had flagged them was you look at the past two losses to Michigan with Ryan Day coaching Ohio State. Michigan really didn't do anything particularly special in any of those games. I don't look at those games and see that Michigan came in with some ultra, 40 galaxy brain game plan. They were close games. They got to halftime as close games, and then all of a sudden it was Michigan running the football. And what concerns me about that is this used to be a rivalry with Urban Meyer coaching Ohio State, where it was Ohio State was throwing all of the punches. Ohio State was making every move and daring Michigan to make the next one and catch up to them. And even when you had a close game like that, the legendary 2016 double overtime game that did get close and could have gone either way, it was Ohio State that made the play that mattered. In these past two games, it's been Ohio State just kind of sitting there and hoping that play comes, and then Michigan going, it's not going to come, so we're just going to take our chance when we get it. And they bust out that big run in Columbus last year, and they bust out another one, and that's the game.
Yep.
And why that concerns me is because Notre Dame, they play that exact same way. They've got a really good running back. They're going to run the football. They're going to play the tempo game. Penn State's going to do the exact same thing. And so I'm questioning Ryan Day here in that, can you make the adjustments here? Can you be that team again that's throwing the punches? And can you beat these Michigan-style teams that are perfectly content to just sit on you and just take over when they see the opportunity? No, Ryan Day's made some changes. I think I saw he's handing off some of the play calling duties to the offensive coordinator. I think that's good. But for me now, it's a prove it moment. Can you not crap yourself in the most important moments of these games? And I'm just not super big on them right now. I don't think he's proven that he can do that, especially when you given the talent that they have. And again, you almost did it with Georgia, almost, and then you fumbled the kick. And that's not his fault, but it just kind of adds to this whole feeling of this just doesn't feel like the same Ohio State roster. So again, stacked roster. Don't bet against them because, we know what they can do, but I want to see them do it.
Very fair.
I will say the offensive or the offseason narrative, like for me, I if you just made me pick, gone to head, I say they lose the Notre Dame and the Michigan games, and the offseason discussion in Columbus on Ryan Day, if they lose 2 games, is going to be really spicy.
Yeah, that's when they officially become an SEC team, I think, then, right? Fire a guy for going 10-2. 2 things that you hit on I want to kind of just add to. we talked about the ramp for CJ Stroud, and he had like the first couple games he was a little iffy, and then he just in his freshman year I'm talking about, and then he was by the third game he was just like kind of what he is. The ramp for McCord here this season is really favorable. At Indiana, hosting Youngstown State, and hosting Western Kentucky. That's really 3 favorable games to get his feet wet. The other thing about Notre Dame playing the same kind of style as Michigan, just want to say stay tuned when we talk about Michigan. I've got a stat that made me gasp about their running game. So just to foreshadowing, just stay tuned on that one.